What is up, guys? Welcome to this video. This video is extra special because it is in fact my birthday, so I just wanted to use this as an excuse to paint a bunch of self-portraits. Because when I was a beginner, more of a beginner artist, I wanted to paint more self-portraits, but I didn't really know how to just like the skill to do that. So now that I do have the skill, I don't really do a lot of self-portraits. So, that was a bit of an excuse to practice that as well. And so the way that I started this painting, you might notice I didn't even do a sketch or anything. I didn't do a thumbnail. I just right away started painting. And this is a valid way of painting. This is another way that it might be a little bit complicated, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of dynamic. So you start with like a blob of paint and you start rendering right away without too much planning or anything. So you start creating the form, you start sculpting the form out of the, like, whatever area you decided to start with. So sometimes I will start with like the nose area and I will sculpt the form out of the blob, kind of like I'm sculpting a sphere somehow. Like I've already talked about the spheres in like the other few videos that I made. But I'm basically focusing on that. I'm sculpting the shapes first, and I'm using those shapes as a guideline in some way to guide me toward the rest of the painting. And here even though, I'm rendering, the rendering is very straightforward, I'm not really focusing that much on the rendering or trying to make it hyper realistic or anything. So I'm just keeping it somewhat simple. I'm trying to use some interesting colors and for the most part keeping the shapes kind of fun, trying to have a bit more of shapes, of stronger shapes, and not trying to not really get things super rendered and blended, I guess. But yeah, here I'm starting another painting. I wanted to give it another shot. And it's more about the same. I might use a bit of lines, which, are more shapes than lines. You see that shape there on the nose bridge. That is more of a shape, but yeah, I use that as a guide for me to know, okay, this is somewhat weird. This is going to be the eyes and the nose. And this is a way I find myself doing this a lot, even when I'm doing my normal paintings. Like whenever I'm gonna paint the eyes or this type of very strong shadows on the face, I will use a very low contrast in the beginning. So I don't know where I got this from, but it seems to really help a lot. So I'm having this rule in my mind of going from low contrast to high contrast. Because look, sometimes when you're gonna paint the eyes are going to be too dark in comparison to the rest of the skin. So it's gonna be it can be a little weird, I don't know, to just paint them like that, just straight up black eyes, very dark. It's gonna look kind of weird. It's gonna look a little bit unrealistic. So, and the same thing with the eyebrows or even the mouth sometimes, or maybe the hair. So what I just start with a very low contrast value, and then I just keep increasing the darkness, which is kind of going from light to dark. And I don't think this is a bad thing, or that it kind of contradicts the principle of going from rendering from dark to light. Because when it comes to the rendering, you want to go from dark to light. We're not really rendering here. When this that I just told you is not too much about rendering. It's more like some sort of sketching. I guess when you're kind of sketching at least the proportions and just knowing where the eyes are going to be, you just make like a shape with very low contrast, and that will be your guideline for the proportions and stuff. But yeah, whenever you're rendering anything, let's say with the nose, for example, I went from dark to light as well. So I started with a dark value and I just kept increasing the brightness until I get a nice volume. So until I can put on that little highlight there, that strong highlight. Yeah, Here I'm mostly, especially here on this, when using this painting method where I'm not sketching or anything, I'm just right away just painting with blobs and just rendering stuff right away. I am basically doing is going one individual area at the time. So I'm going rendering the forehead. Once I'm done with the forehead, I'm gonna go with the cheek area, and once I'm done with that, I'm gonna go with the chin or with the nose. Since there's not a whole lot of rendering going on, I can kind of move around and render a little bit the forehead, then render the nose a little bit more, come back to the forehead, and so on. But you always go in like one area at a time. It's not like whenever I do thumbnails that I paint the whole thing and I focus on the entire image. But here is more about individual parts. And the hand, I didn't like that hand too much. But with the hand, it would be pretty much the same. You want to separate kind of each plane of the hand. Each finger, for example, will be like, as I said, like the cylinder and sphere analogy, because the fingers have this very cylindrical shape. You want it to render each one as an individual cylinder, if that makes sense. And it stops being like hard when you see it this way, when you separate it. And it's the same thing. We're kind of separating the palms of the palm of the hand. But anyways, yeah, I'm doing another portrait. Just a silly one here. Just wanted to mess around with this brush and with the bounce light. So I wanted to really exaggerate the bounce light on this one, and I was using this brush. So I wanted to start using a bit more fun brushes, not because the round brush is not, well, the round brush can actually be a little bit of a boring brush. It is very useful. It is very amazing brush. It is extremely, it is a top tier brush indeed. However, it can be a little bit boring. I'm gonna be honest. So if you can get some variations of the round brush, like a round brush with some sort of stronger shapes or something like that, maybe a square round brush of some sort, or what I did here, I just enabled a color dynamic here on the brush settings, and I was able to get this kind of heavy paint brush, so I can make this texture looking, this color dynamics that where, I don't really have too much control over the colors or the brush. So it's kind of randomized, and that makes it really fun to use, actually. So yeah, I was aiming to exaggerate the bounce light, just what I call it, just colorful shadows, making the shadows look colorful. And yeah, so here I'm also starting another portrait on Rebelle. This is Rebelle 5, by the way. I'm using Rebelle 5 for this painting and for all the paintings that you see me use here. I like to switch between this program because it has very fun brushes. I didn't really like it that much at first because the brushes were a little bit complicated to use. But now I think I understand a little bit more how they work, and I'm feeling more comfortable with them. So I tried just doing a quick portrait on this, just to test it. I didn't really like it that much because, I don't know, I guess the colors, I could have rendered it a little bit more probably. Or I should have more clear what type of style I was trying to aim for, because, at first I wanted to do, okay, maybe I can go something like a Mark Tennant Impressionism or something, like I always do whenever I'm painting like this. But I guess I just got into the zone and did whatever the hell I was doing earlier, but with these other brushes, because these brushes are different. The way they work is just blending instead of doing this, instead of the opacity brush and whatnot. But I'm just doing the same thing. I'm creating form. I feel like the colors are way too desaturated and muddy, but whatever, it looks kind of artistic. I like the brushstrokes. The brushstrokes look fun, at least. Here I tried to add a little bit more bluish tones because, I felt like it was looking too warm and, it was looking very desaturated. So yeah, I should have added some more desaturation. I tend to make things a lot desaturated, especially not only because of the brushes, but because of the way the color wheel works here. Because it's not a triangle, it really pisses me off whenever I'm using this. But anyways, that's about it for the paintings. That's about it for the video. So if you want to get my painting course or you want to get coaching from me, you can check the first link in the description and I'll help you out with your art. See you in the next video.